Before we begin, comment where you're watching from. And if you love shocking twist stories where karma hits like a truck, make sure you subscribe and like right now, because what happens after this Christmas party? It turns a nobody wife into the most feared name in the room. I'll never forget the sound of my wedding ring skidding across polished marble. Not the sight of it, the sound. That sharp little scrape, like something breaking that couldn't be fixed. 1 second it was on my finger. The next, it was spinning away from me, catching the chandelier light like a coin flipping for my life. And all around me, rich people in designer suits, laughing like it was the best entertainment they'd get all winter. I stood there soaked in sparkling cider, my cheeks burning, my hands shaking, holding a pen I could barely grip. And my husband, was smiling. Ethan Caldwell lifted the microphone like he was announcing a charity donation instead of my public execution. "Thank you all for coming," he said, smooth and calm. "Tonight is about new beginnings, new beginnings." He said it while looking straight at me, like I was a stain he couldn't wait to wipe off. I should have walked out. But the truth is, I'd spent years training myself to survive humiliation, quietly, politely, like it was a skill. Because when you grow up unwanted, you learn a dangerous habit. You start believing you deserve whatever people do to you. My name is Harper Lane. At least, that's what I thought my name was. And the night I signed those divorce papers wasn't the end of my marriage. It was the beginning of something else. Something Ethan Caldwell still has nightmares about. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me rewind, because the way they set me up, how carefully they planned my downfall, makes what happened next even sweeter. The Caldwell estate sat outside Greenwich, Connecticut, like a museum disguised as a home. Snow fell in perfect cinematic flakes, covering the hedges and stone fountains like powdered sugar. The driveway was lined with glowing lanterns. A 30-foot Christmas tree stood behind the grand windows, lit up like a beacon calling every wealthy parasite within 50 miles. Valets took cars that cost more than my entire life. Guests arrived in fur-lined coats, laughing too loudly, holding crystal glasses like they were born holding them. They kissed cheeks and exchanged stock tips and aspen plants. And I walked in through the side entrance. Because even after 4 years of marriage, the main doors weren't for me. I wore the only sweater I owned that didn't have pilling on the sleeves. Cream-colored, too thin for a Connecticut winter. Over it, my brown coat from a thrift store in Bridgeport. The zipper stuck halfway, so I'd pinned it closed with a safety pin. I checked my reflection in the service hallway mirror. My hair was pulled into a neat bun. No jewelry except my wedding ring, simple worn, the kind you buy when you're in love and broke. I looked like someone's assistant, not someone's wife. Marjorie Caldwell made sure I never forgot the difference. She met me near the kitchen doors in a red velvet gown that hugged her like she belonged in a magazine. Diamonds rested on her collarbones like ice. Her eyes flicked over me. "You're late," she said. "Not hello. Not Merry Christmas. Not even my name, just, you're late." "I had to cover a shift," I said softly. "The diner," Marjorie waved her hand like swatting a fly. "The guests need drinks. Make yourself useful, Harper. Make yourself useful." It was her favorite phrase, as if my existence needed to be justified every second. I swallowed my pride like I always did, and stepped into the ballroom. Instantly, heat and perfume hit me. Expensive florals, cinnamon cigar smoke, and that sugary smell money has when it gathers in one place. A jazz band played near the fireplace. The Caldwells had turned the house into a staged dream. White and gold decor, crystal snowflakes hanging from the ceiling, a fake eye sculpture of two swans kissing. Even the waitstaff wore matching black outfits with gold buttons. Except me. Marjorie didn't allow me to wear the staff uniform, because then I might look like I belonged. I took a tray of drinks and started weaving through bodies that never moved out of my way. Champagne, I offered. They ignored me unless their glass was empty. The first time someone acknowledged me that night was a man with slick hair and a watch the size of my palm. He didn't look at my face. He looked at my hands. "Ah," he said loudly to the woman beside him. "The Caldwell Charity Project." The woman laughed and sipped her drink. "Is that her? How quaint." My throat tightened. 4 years ago, if you'd told me I'd be standing in this room, married into one of Connecticut's most powerful families, I would have cried from happiness. Because my life before Ethan was a series of locked doors. I grew up in foster care, not the sweet kind with warm cookies and bedtime stories, the kind where you learn to sleep light because anything can happen when the adults are angry, drunk, or bored. The kind where your belongings fit in a trash bag and your heart learns to fold itself small. I didn't have a family. I had caseworkers. I didn't have holidays. I had extra shifts and the smell of bleach in group home bathrooms. So when Ethan Caldwell walked into the diner where I served pancakes at 2 a.m. and smiled at me like I was worth something, it felt like God finally apologized. He was charming back then, warm, patient. He used to hold my hands across the booth and say, "You're not alone anymore, Harper. You have me now," and I believed him. Because I wanted to. I wanted a home so badly I ignored the cracks in the walls. The night I married him, Marjorie smiled for the cameras and then whispered in my ear at the reception, "Enjoy it while it lasts." I laughed awkwardly, thinking it was just nerves. It wasn't. It was a promise. And Ethan? Ethan didn't protect me. He never did. I spotted him across the room at Christmas night, standing under the massive tree, like a prince in a tailored black suit. For one stupid second, my heart still did that pathetic little jump. Then I saw who was beside him. A woman in a silver gown that clung to her body like liquid metal. Long blonde hair. Perfect makeup. A smile that looked practiced in mirrors. Her hand rested on Ethan's arm as if it belonged there. And he let it. My tray tilted slightly, the glasses clinking. I steadied it with shaking fingers. I'd seen her before, not in person. On Marjorie's phone, photos she accidentally left open when I walked into the room. On Ethan's laptop, an email thread he forgot to log out of once. On society pages online, Sloan Whitmore, daughter of Senator Whitmore, attends gala. Sloan Whitmore. And the way she leaned into my husband, laughing at something he whispered, made my stomach drop into my shoes. A voice behind me cut through the music. "There you are, Vanessa Caldwell, Ethan's younger sister," glided up with two friends. She wore a white fur stole and a smirk that never meant anything good. "Harper," Vanessa said loudly, "you're supposed to stay near the bar. Don't wander. People might think you're a guest." Her friends giggled. I kept my eyes down. "I'm working." Vanessa leaned in close enough that only I could hear. "Oh, you're going to work tonight. You're going to work so hard you'll finally understand your place." Then she patted my cheek like I was a pet and walked away. I stood frozen. My skin crawled with that familiar feeling, like I was back in foster care and someone had just told me, smiling, that tonight would be bad. I looked back at Ethan. He didn't look at me once. Not once. The party swelled. More guests arrived. More laughter. More cameras. And then, just when I thought maybe Ethan would pull away from Sloan, Marjorie clinked her glass with a spoon. The music softened. People turned. Marjorie stepped onto the small platform near the tree like she owned the air. "My dear friends," she announced, beaming, "thank you for celebrating with us. The Caldwell Christmas Gala has always been about tradition, and tonight we're adding a new tradition." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Ethan moved beside her, holding a folder. Sloan stood on his other side. My lungs stopped working properly. I knew that folder. I'd seen it on Ethan's desk 2 weeks ago. When I asked what it was, he said, "Just business." My fingers went numb around the tray. Marjorie turned her gaze toward me, sharp as a blade. "And now," she said, voice dripping, "honey, Ethan would like to make an announcement." Ethan took the microphone. He looked calm, too calm, like he'd rehearsed this in the mirror. He scanned the room, smiling at the right people, investors, donors, politicians. Then his eyes found me. He held my gaze, and in that moment something inside me begged him, "Please, don't." His mouth curved, almost apologetic. But his eyes were cold. "4 years ago," Ethan said, "I made a decision based on emotion." The room quieted more. Even the jazz band stopped. "I thought love was enough," he continued. "But love doesn't build legacies. Love doesn't protect families. Love doesn't keep a man from wasting his potential." My face burned. People started looking around, trying to guess what this was about. Vanessa lifted her phone and aimed it at me. I saw the bright screen. She was live streaming. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it. Ethan's voice didn't shake. "And tonight," he said, "I'm correcting that decision." He opened the folder. The papers inside were crisp and white. Too clean, too final. Harper, he said, hearing my name from his mouth in front of everyone. Felt like being called to the principal's office. Except the punishment was public. Come here, my legs wouldn't move, they wouldn't. I stood there with a tray of drinks like a statue. Marjorie tilted her head, smiling wider. Don't be shy. Everyone's waiting, whispers began. Is that his wife? I didn't know he was still married. She's the one from the diner, right? My throat closed. 2 security guards, yes, security guards, like I was dangerous, appeared near me. One of them leaned down. Ma'am, please, please. As if I had a choice, I walked. Every step felt like walking to a firing squad. The room blurred around the edges. I climbed the small steps to the platform, and suddenly I was under the glow of chandelier light, surrounded by faces that didn't care if I lived or died as long as I entertained them. Ethan held out the papers and a pen. I stared at them. Divorce. The words screamed at me without being spoken. Sloane's lips curled, subtle and cruel. She leaned in like she was sharing a secret. It's not personal, she whispered. It's just, you were never meant to be here. I looked at Ethan. My voice came out broken. Are you serious? He sighed like I was exhausting him. Harper, don't do this, he said quietly. Don't make it messy. Like I was a spill, like 4 years of marriage were a stain. You promised me, I whispered. You said. I said a lot of things when I was young, he cut in, still smiling for the crowd. But the truth is, this was a mistake. A laugh popped from somewhere in the room. Someone else joined, then more. Like a chain reaction, my vision blurred with tears. Marjorie stepped forward, holding a glass, sparkling cider, because even their cruelty had a holiday theme. Signed, she said simply. My hand trembled. I tried to read the pages, but the words swam. Then Vanessa shouted from the crowd, "Tell her about the prenup." People laughed again. Ethan leaned toward the microphone. Oh, right, he said, like it was a fun detail. Harper, you remember the prenup you signed? My stomach dropped. Of course I remembered. A thick document Marjorie's lawyer slid across the table the week before the wedding. I'd asked for time to read it. Marjorie smiled and said, if you truly love Ethan, you won't need to read it. And Ethan squeezed my hand under the table and whispered, it's just to make my mother feel better. You can trust me, so I signed. Because trust was the only currency I had back then. Ethan continued, it's very simple. You'll leave with your personal belongings. No compensation, no claim to anything Caldwell. Then he added casually, and you'll be responsible for the debts in your name. Debts? My heart stopped. What debts? I whispered. Ethan's eyes flickered, just for a second. Then he smiled again. Don't worry about it, he murmured. Just sign. I turned to Marjorie. I don't have debt. And then Marjorie raised her glass. For a moment I didn't understand, then she threw it. The cold cider splashed across my face and chest, soaking my sweater, dripping down my neck like icy humiliation. The glass hit the floor and shattered, sharp and loud. The room gasped, then went dead silent. Marjorie leaned close enough that I could smell her perfume, rose and poison. That, she whispered, is for thinking you could wear our name. My face was burning. My hands were shaking so hard the pen nearly slipped. Ethan didn't move. He didn't tell her to stop. He didn't wipe my face. He didn't even look guilty. He just held the papers steady, waiting. Waiting for me to erase myself. Something inside me cracked open, not into courage, not yet, into emptiness. The kind of emptiness that makes you stop fighting because you realize you've been fighting alone the entire time. I took the pen, and I signed. The ink scratched the paper like a tiny scream. My signature didn't even look like mine because my hand was trembling so badly. Ethan took the papers satisfied, like he'd closed a deal. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a few bills, folded casual. He pressed them into my palm. Take an Uber, he said. Consider it assistance, like I was a stray animal. The room erupted in laughter again. Relieved the awkward moment was over, Vanessa's phone stayed pointed at me as she whispered loudly, bye, foster girl. The security guard stepped in immediately. One grabbed my elbow. I jerked back instinctively. Ma'am, the other said, you need to leave, like I was the one who'd done something wrong. I looked at Ethan one last time. Was any of it real? I asked, voice shaking. For a flicker of a second, his eyes softened. Then Sloane touched his arm, and the softness vanished. Ethan's jaw tightened. "Don't do this," he said again. "Just go." So they dragged me. They dragged Ethan Caldwell's wife through the ballroom in front of 200 people like I was a thief. My wet sweater clung to my skin. The cold air from the foyer hit me like a slap. As the front doors opened, I saw snow falling outside, soft, beautiful, and completely indifferent. The guards pushed me out onto the front steps. My heel caught the edge of the stone. I stumbled, and that's when my ring slipped off. It slid across the marble with that sharp scraping sound and disappeared under the snow. I didn't go looking for it, because what was the point? The gate shut behind me. The mansion lights glowed warm in the distance, like I was watching someone else's life through thick glass. I walked. No car, no home, no husband, just me, the snow, and a handful of bills clenched in my fist like a joke. 3 miles later, I found a 24-hour diner off the highway, the kind with flickering neon and tired booths. I sat in the corner, shivering, still damp, still shaking. My phone battery was at 3%. My bank account, last I checked, was at $312. And my entire adult life, everything I'd built by working double shifts, saving coins in jars, skipping meals, had just been wiped out in front of rich strangers who'd clapped for it. I stared at the table until my vision blurred. A waitress approached gently. "Honey, you okay?" I couldn't answer. If I opened my mouth, I'd collapse. Then my phone rang. Restricted number. I almost ignored it. Scammers called all the time. But something in my chest tightened. An instinct I couldn't explain. I answered, "Hello." My voice sounded like it belonged to someone else. A woman spoke, precise and professional. "Is this Harper Lane?" "Yes," I whispered, a pause. Then, "Ms. Lane, I'm so sorry. That name may not be yours." My entire body went cold. "What?" I said. The woman continued, calm as if reading a script. "My name is Patricia Hale. I'm an attorney representing Sterling Family Trust." I blinked hard, trying to understand. She said the next word slowly, as if she expected me to drop the phone. "According to sealed records and DNA confirmation, your birth name is Harper Monroe Sterling. Sterling." My heart slammed against my ribs. "That's impossible," I whispered. You were reported missing from a Boston hospital 26 years ago," Patricia said. "And we finally found you." I couldn't breathe. Outside the diner window, snow fell quietly. And in the parking lot, a black SUV rolled in and stopped. The headlights turned off. Two silhouettes stepped out and started walking toward the door. My phone pressed against my ear, Patricia's voice cutting through my panic. "Harper," she said, urgency entering her tone for the first time. "You need to listen carefully. Your father is still alive, but not for long. And the people who took your life from you." The diner door opened. A gust of cold air swept in, and I saw them. One was a woman in a gray coat holding a leather folder. The other was an older man with tired eyes and a face that looked strangely familiar, like I'd seen it in my own reflection. They scanned the diner. Then the woman's gaze locked onto me. She walked over fast. "Harper?" she asked softly. My throat tightened so hard it hurt. "Yes," I whispered. She placed the leather folder on the table, and the older man sat down across from me, hands trembling. He stared at my face like he was trying to memorize every detail before it vanished. Then he said, voice breaking, "Thank God, we finally found you." And that's when Patricia's voice on the phone turned into a warning. "Harper," she said, "there are people who will do anything to keep you from finding out who you are." The older man reached into his coat. He pulled out a photograph and slid it toward me. I looked down. The picture showed a young woman holding a newborn baby. Her eyes, her cheekbones, her smile. It was like looking at myself in another life. The woman in the gray coat leaned close and whispered, "That's your mother." My hands went numb. My phone slipped slightly in my grip, and Patricia's last words landed like a gunshot. "Do not go back to the Caldwells. Not yet, not yet." Because apparently my life wasn't over. It was about to explode. If you're still watching this on Stories Untold, take a second to hit that like button and subscribe. Because from here on, every choice Harper makes is a step closer to turning that Christmas humiliation into a public execution. And she's the one holding the axe. The photograph on the table wouldn't stop shaking. It took a second to realize it wasn't the photo. It was my hands. The woman in the picture looked exactly like me. If I'd been born into light instead of shadows. Same eyes, same mouth, same stubborn jawline. Her hair spilled over her shoulders in dark waves as she cradled a newborn, wrapped in a hospital blanket. Someone had written in blue ink along the bottom, Clara and Harper, 3:14 a.m. My name, not the name on my foster care files. The name someone gave me before I ever knew what loss was. The woman in the gray coat, Patricia, the attorney, opened the leather folder and laid out documents with the same calm care a surgeon would use with scalpels. Birth certificate, DNA report, newspaper clipping, Sterling heiress and newborn daughter missing in hospital chaos. Court orders, hospital logs. I stared as words like kidnapping, inheritance, trust, and legal heir blurred together. The older man across from me watched my face, like each flicker of expression might kill him. His eyes were a faded blue, ringed with red, like he'd cried more in the last week than in the last 10 years. Finally he spoke. Harper, he said quietly, I'm your father. My name is Daniel Sterling. Sterling, the same name on the trust. The same name on at least 3 skyscrapers. I'd cleaned bathrooms and over the years without ever looking up at the logos. I don't understand, I whispered. Daniel swallowed, fingers lacing together to stop their tremor. Your mother, Clara, went into labor at St. Matthew's Hospital in Boston 26 years ago, he said. There were complications. She didn't make it. His voice broke on the word. I felt a sharp ache in my chest for a woman I'd never met and somehow missed my entire life. I passed out from the shock, he continued. When I woke up, you were gone. The hospital said there'd been a fire in the records room, chaos in the maternity ward. A nurse claimed she'd seen someone running with a baby. By the time security locked everything down, there was no trace of you. My mind raced, trying to fit this story inside the narrow box of the life I knew. But how did I end up in Connecticut? In foster care, I asked. Why does every file say my parents abandoned me? Patricia slid another sheet forward. A letter yellowed at the edges, the handwriting shaky but deliberate. 3 years ago, she said, a retired nurse named Abigail Knox died in upstate New York. She left a confession. She tapped the letter. In it, she admits she was paid to remove the Sterling infant from the hospital and hand her off to a third party, along with forged paperwork that would ensure the child disappeared into the system as an unclaimed orphan. My stomach twisted. Paid by who? I asked. Patricia hesitated, glancing at Daniel. He looked away, jaw tight. The investigation is ongoing, Patricia said carefully. But there are names, people who would have benefited from Daniel having no direct heir, people who sit on boards, people with connections. And some of those people, Daniel added, finally meeting my gaze again, have done business with the Caldwell family. The Caldwell name hit me like a physical blow. I gripped the edge of the table. You're telling me, I said slowly, that the same people who just kicked me out of their mansion might have known who I really am. Patricia didn't answer. She didn't need to. It was all there unspoken, in the way her eyes tightened, and in the way Daniel's hand clenched around his coffee cup. Daniel took a breath, gathering himself. For 23 years, he said, I paid investigators, hired firms, put up reward. I never stopped looking for you. When the trail went cold, I blamed myself. I thought maybe you were gone. He blinked hard. Then, after Abigail's letter surfaced, everything changed. We ran your DNA through every system we legally could. 2 weeks ago, we hit a match. Your name came up, Harper Lane, foster cases, employment records, marriage certificate. His face darkened when he said marriage certificate. Patricia slid another set of papers across the table. My own life stared back at me. My driver's license, my marriage license with Ethan's signature next to mine, a scanned copy of the prenup I never read. You've been through hell, Daniel said, and most of it was designed to keep you powerless. I looked between them. Why now? My voice sounded small. Why tonight? Patricia reached for another envelope. This one was sealed with a dark blue wax stamp. Because, she said softly, Daniel's health has taken a turn, fast. You're not just the daughter he's been searching for. You are legally and financially the sole surviving heir to the Sterling Family Trust and controlling interest in Sterling Global Holdings. The words washed over me like static. Sterling Global, I murmured. The hotel chain? The tech? The shipping? All of it, Patricia said. It was supposed to be yours by birthright. Instead, other people have been making decisions with your legacy. Some of them not in your best interest. Daniel leaned forward, eyes fierce despite the tears. Harper, listen to me, he said. You are not the charity case they told you you were. You are not trash. You were stolen, stolen. The word lodged in my throat. All those years in group homes, all the nights scrubbing diner floors, Marjorie's voice in my ear. Make yourself useful. Ethan's hand releasing mine at the altar faster than he'd ever grabbed it. None of it had been about fate or bad luck or the universe hating me. Someone had chosen this for me. Why tell me all this in a diner, I whispered. Why not? I don't know. Send a letter. Summon me with security and lawyers and a driver at the door. Patricia folded her hands. Because, she said, we're not the only ones who know we found you. A chill crawled up my spine. What does that mean? I asked. She glanced toward the window before answering. When we initiated the court motions to re-establish you as Daniel's legal heir, certain parties were notified, she said carefully. They requested delays. They asked to review the evidence. And earlier today, someone tried to file an objection, claiming you were mentally unstable and unfit to manage the estate. My mouth dropped open. Who would? Patricia's expression hardened. A Caldwell-affiliated holding company co-signed the objection, she said. Specifically, a shell corporation controlled by a man named Victor Sterling. I blinked. Sterling? I repeated. Daniel's jaw clenched. My younger brother, he spat, the word brother sounding like an insult. Patricia continued, voice clip. Victor has been acting as interim chairman of Sterling Global, while Daniel focused on finding you and dealing with his health. Publicly, he's the dutiful uncle. Privately, she let the silence finish the sentence. Privately, Daniel said, he's been bleeding this company dry. We just didn't know how deep it went until we started tracing the money he spent, making sure you stayed lost. The room felt smaller. The hum of the diner's fluorescent lights grew louder. You're telling me, I said slowly, that my uncle tried to erase me, and now the family that just threw me out is tied to him? Patricia nodded. And they know, she added, that if you walk into court with the right documentation, Victor loses everything he thinks is his. Daniel's eyes softened again. I didn't want your first night as my daughter to be like this, he said hoarsely. I wanted Christmas mornings, birthdays, school plays. Instead, I get to meet you in a highway diner after you've been publicly humiliated by people who should have cherished you. Something inside me cracked then, not like it had on the platform at the gala. This was different. Back there, the crack had emptied me out. Here, it let something new in. Rage, not the wild, flailing kind. The quiet, focused kind that takes notes. I'm not going back to them, I said. Ever, Patricia and Daniel exchanged a look. I wish it were that simple, Patricia said. My head snapped up. What do you mean? I asked. I can walk away. They signed the papers. I'm done. Patricia pulled out one last folder. Thinner than the others, heavier somehow. I did a preliminary search when we found your marriage license, she said, to make sure you weren't legally entangled with anyone. Problematic, her eyes met mine. I'm afraid you are, she said quietly. She opened the folder. Loan agreements. Credit card statements. A line of signatures that almost looked like mine, but not quite. These are debts, she said, in your name, $58,000 worth, taken out over the last 2 years. My heart hammered against my ribs. I would remember. You didn't sign them, Patricia said. But someone did, and the handwriting analysis is highly suggestive. She flipped to a page. On it, 2 signatures sat side by side. Mine from our marriage certificate, and the one on the loans. I stared. They weren't identical, but they were close, too close. Ethan, I breathed. Patricia nodded once. We can fight it, she said. With the resources you'll have, we can bury them in court. But right now, on paper, you are a divorced, penniless woman with massive debt and no visible support system, which makes it very easy for Victor, or anyone else, to paint you as unstable, irresponsible, maybe even manipulative, the way Ethan's mother had always described me behind polite smiles. Daniel reached across the table and took my cold hands in his. Harper, he said, voice low and fierce, you are none of those things. You are my daughter. You are stronger than they are. And I intend to give you every tool you need to prove it. Tears burned behind my eyes. All my life, I'd wanted someone to say you're mine and mean it in a way that didn't hurt. Hearing it now from a man who'd crossed decades and oceans of paperwork to find me was almost too much. I don't know how to be. I gestured weakly at the documents. This person, an heiress, a CEO, someone whose last name is on buildings. Daniel squeezed my hands. You know how to work, he said simply. You know how to survive. The rest you can learn. And I have very little time left to teach you. The way he said time hit me like a punch. What's wrong? I asked softly. Patricia looked down, in so shock. Daniel exhaled slowly. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer, he said matter-of-factly. Doctors say 3 to 6 months. Maybe less. The diner sounds dimmed. A waitress refilled someone's coffee. A door chimed. Somewhere a baby cried. Life went on while the man who'd been searching for me my entire existence told me he was running out of days. I just found you, I whispered, voice breaking. You can't. He shook his head gently. I can't change my diagnosis, he said, but I can decide how I spend what I have left. And I will not leave this world knowing the people who stole you still hold power over you or over what should be yours. I swallowed hard. What do you need from me? I asked. Patricia sat a little straighter. First, she said, come with us. We have a secure residence outside Boston where you'll be safe and off the radar. No social media, no contact with the Caldwells, no returning to your old job. For now, your world shrinks to a simple goal. Learn everything you can about what? I asked. About who you really are, she said. And about the people who tried to erase you. The Sterling estate outside Boston didn't look real. Tall iron gates, long winding driveway lined with bare trees, their branches wrapped in soft white lights. A stone manor house with warm windows and a front door big enough to swallow the entire dining room of any foster home I'd ever lived in. As the car rolled to a stop, something squeezed tight in my chest. This could have been mine. Most people would say it was mine now. But standing there on the gravel, staring up at the life I'd been stolen from, all I could think was, what would my childhood have been like if I'd walked through these doors holding my mother's hand instead of a social worker's clipboard? Daniel watched me carefully as Patricia led us inside. If it's too much, he said quietly, we can go to the city apartment instead. Smaller. Less, it's fine, I cut in, surprising us both. If this is my life, I need to see it. All of it? Rooms unfolded like pages in a storybook I'd once wanted to read and been told I wasn't smart enough for. Library with floor-to-ceiling shelves. Music room with a grand piano. A staircase that curved like something out of a movie. Patricia led me to a guest suite. The kind of place VIP probably stayed in. King-size bed, fireplace. A bathroom bigger than the last place I'd rented. I looked down at my stained sweater and thrift store coat, suddenly hyper-aware of every threadbare seam. I don't have anything to wear, I muttered. Patricia smiled slightly. That's already being handled, she said. But clothes are the easy part. She set a leather-bound planner on the desk. We have a lot to do. By 8, I was at the long oak table in the study, hair pulled back, notebook open. Patricia walked me through the basics of corporate structure, trusts, offshore accounts, regulatory boards. She spoke in clear, careful sentences, testing how much I could absorb. When you've spent years keeping track of rotating foster homes, shift schedules, food stamps, and the emotional weather of unstable adults, you develop a strange kind of intelligence. I just never had a chance to point it at anything that mattered. Now I did. Afternoons, a different tutor. Finance, market analysis, negotiation tactics. Evenings, a woman named Aisha taught me posture, speech patterns, the subtle nonverbal language of the elite, where to place a hand on a table, how to walk into a room and make people stand up without saying a word. At night, when the house was finally quiet, I'd sit in the library with Daniel. He was thinner every week. Sometimes he dozed off mid-sentence. Other nights, he was sharp and animated, telling me stories about my mother. How she'd argued her way into meetings she wasn't supposed to be in. How she'd insisted on subsidized housing projects instead of luxury condos. You have her eyes, he'd say, but the way you listen, that's new. That's yours. Between lessons, Patricia fed me information on Victor and the Caldwells. Victor Sterling, charming in public, vicious in private. Documented history of creative accounting, a string of quietly settled lawsuits, rumors of intimidation that never quite reached the press. Marjorie Caldwell grew up middle class, married up, desperate to stay there. Chair of 3 charities, all of which spent more on galas than on the causes they claimed to support. Richard Caldwell, Ethan's father, who'd been too busy traveling to attend the Christmas gala, sat on the board of 2 Sterling subsidiaries. Golf partner to Victor, co-signatory on loans that funneled money out of Sterling Global into shell companies with no employees. Ethan, golden boy groomed to inherit everything until his marriage to the wrong girl became a convenient excuse to cast him as the victim of a manipulative social climber. In the public story, I'd ruined his life. In reality, he'd used my name to take on debts he didn't want to touch his own credit. Every new document Patricia uncovered was like a match striking dry tinder inside me. I didn't just want justice anymore. I wanted precision. "You have enough to call the police now, don't you?" I asked one night, flipping through a spreadsheet that traced missing millions from a Sterling charity. Patricia nodded. "We do," she said. "But if we move now, Victor will claim this is a smear campaign by a daughter who just conveniently appeared when a fortune was at stake. He'll stall. He'll drag you through the mud. And he'll keep enough control to bury half of what we found." "Then what's the plan?" I asked. Daniel answered from his armchair. "You don't walk into a rigged game and hope to win by playing fair," he said. "You flip the table." He leaned forward, eyes bright despite his gaunt face. "Victor thinks you're weak," he said. "The Caldwells think you're gone. They see you as a humiliated foster kid with no resources and no voice." His lips curled. "Good. Let them." Patricia slid a slim folder toward me. On the front, a name was embossed in silver. "Elena Hart." "What's this?" I asked. "Your first weapon," Patricia said. "A new identity, new background, new story." Elena Hart, American-born, educated abroad. A private investor with a reputation for turning around distressed assets. No online footprint except what we seed. Enough truth to make you convincing. Enough fiction to keep you safe until we're ready to reveal who you really are. I opened the folder. Driver's license, passport, bank account statements with numbers that made my head spin. A brief biography. Elena Hart, 32, returns to the U.S. after a decade of working with European family offices to quietly salvage companies on the brink of collapse. "Why her?" I asked. "Because the Caldwells are on the brink of collapse," Patricia said simply. "They just don't know it yet. The first time I saw myself as Elena, I didn't recognize the woman in the mirror. Gone was the too thin girl in a pilly sweater. My hair, cut into a sharp shoulder-length style, framed my face instead of apologizing for it. A subtle smoky eye made my gaze look deliberate, not timid. The suit I wore, charcoal gray, perfectly tailored, hugged my shoulders, straightened my spine. Aisha adjusted the lapel and stepped back. "Remember," she said, "Elena doesn't walk into a room hoping she won't be noticed. She walks in assuming everyone is already waiting." My heart thudded. "I'm still me under this," I said quietly. "Exactly," Aisha replied. "That's what makes it powerful. This isn't about pretending to be someone else. It's about giving the real you armor." Patricia appeared in the doorway, holding a tablet. "They took the bait," she said. "We sent a discreet inquiry from Elena's family office to Caldwell Holdings, expressing interest in their hospitality division." My chest tightened. "And?" I asked. She smiled. "Meeting confirmed," she said. "Tomorrow noon, at the Caldwell Tower in Manhattan. Attendees will include Richard and Marjorie Caldwell, and Ethan." The room tilted for a second. I grabbed the back of the chair. "Ethan's going to be there?" I asked. Patricia nodded. "You don't have to do this," Daniel said from behind her, voice soft. He'd insisted on walking to the doorway himself, leaning on his cane instead of letting anyone wheel him. "We can start somewhere else." "Another board? Another ally?" I straightened slowly. "No," I said. "This started with them. It's going to turn with them." I turned back to the mirror. Harper Lane stared back at me from beneath the surface of Elena Hart. Or maybe the other way around. Either way, for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I was about to beg for a place at someone else's table. I felt like I was bringing my own. The Caldwell Tower in Manhattan had a lobby I knew too well. I'd once mopped that marble at 2 in the morning, my hands red and raw from chemicals, listening to the footsteps of men in suits echo long after I'd gone home. Today, the security guard glanced up as I walked in on heels that clicked with the same confidence. "Good morning, Miss Hart," he said, reading my name off the iPad. "They're expecting you. 52nd floor. Not what are you doing here? Not service entrances around back. They were expecting me." The elevator ride felt endless. I watched my reflection in the mirrored walls, back straight, jaw set. When the doors opened, a receptionist with a bright smile greeted me. "Ms. Hart," she said. "Right this way." She led me into a glass-walled conference room, with a view of the city that should have taken my breath away. It didn't, because my eyes went straight to the man standing at the head of the table. Ethan. He turned at the sound of the door. For a second, he looked right through me, just another potential investor to charm. Then his eyes narrowed. Something flickered across his face. Confusion, recognition trying to claw its way to the surface. He took a step closer, studying me. "Ms. Hart," he said slowly, "thank you for coming." I smiled, the way Aisha had taught me. "Just enough teeth, just enough warmth. Thank you for having me," I replied. "I've heard fascinating things about your family." Marjorie swept into the room like she owned the oxygen. She wore navy this time, pearls at her throat, her hair perfect. "Miss Hart," she gushed, extending a hand. "What an honor. We were thrilled when your office reached out. We followed your work in Europe. Remarkable rescues. The Caldwells love a good turnaround story." Her grip was firm, her eyes assessing. I shook her hand, unflinching. "I'm particularly interested in turnarounds," I said, "especially when someone's been undervalued." For a second, something in her gaze sharpened. Then it was gone, replaced by polished charm. Richard Caldwell entered last, talking on his phone, barely glancing at me. He ended the call with a quick, "Sell it," then turned. "Miss Hart," he said, voice smooth. "Pleasure. Let's talk numbers." We sat. They launched into a presentation about their hospitality portfolio. Charts, occupancy rates, projections. I watched Ethan carefully as he talked about vision and legacy. His hands moving gracefully, his voice practiced. He was performing. But beneath the performance, I saw it now. The nerves, the calculations, the tiny flinch whenever a number didn't quite add up. Harper would have been too busy shrinking into her chair to notice. Elena didn't shrink, she probed. "So," I said lightly after one particularly rosy slide, "given your current debt-to-equity ratio, how do you plan to service your short-term obligations if interest rates tick up another point?" Richard blinked. Marjorie's smile froze. Ethan recovered first. "We have lines of credit," he said smoothly. "Undrawn facilities. Personal relationships with lenders." I tilted my head. "Personal relationships can sour," I said, "especially when one party feels misled." Ethan's jaw flexed. In that moment, I saw the flash of the man who'd stood on a platform and told me not to make it messy. The man who'd handed me a stack of bills like a tip. I kept my voice pleasant. "I did some preliminary digging," I said, as one does. "I noticed a few interesting loan instruments issued in the last 2 years." I slid a thin folder across the table. Patricia had helped me prepare this prop. Not the full evidence, just enough to unsettle. "Some of those instruments," I continued, "are backed by a guarantor named Harper Lane." Silence. You could hear the hum of the air conditioning. Ethan's fingers tightened on the edge of the folder. He didn't open it. Didn't need to. He knew exactly what was inside. "She was my first wife," he said finally, his voice cooling. "A mistake from a long time ago. She's not relevant to this discussion." I smiled. "Oh, I think she might be," I said softly. "You see, investors like me get skittish when they see a pattern of, let's call it, creative use of other people's identities." Richard's face hardened. "If you have accusations to make, Miss Hart," he said, "make them clearly. We don't respond well to insinuation." Marjorie reached out, placing a calming hand on his arm. "Richard," she murmured, "I'm sure Miss Hart simply wants reassurance. After all, in today's climate, reputation is everything." She turned back to me. "Rest assured," she said sweetly, "any obligations associated with my son's unfortunate first marriage are absolutely under control." The girl was troubled. She took on debts she couldn't handle. Ethan, being the generous man he is, tried to help. It was all very sad. The girl, troubled, sad. I kept my face neutral. Inside, a storm raged. "Is that so?" I asked lightly. Because the narrative I've heard paints a rather different picture. Ethan's eyes snapped to mine. For a heartbeat, something like fear flashed there. Not full-blown, just a hint. Enough. I leaned back in my chair, crossing one leg over the other, just as Aisha had drilled into me. Well, I said, voice cool now. I didn't come here today to litigate your past choices. I came to see if investing in the Caldwell vision is worth my time. I let the words hang. Is it? Richard asked. I looked out the window at the city. All those buildings, all those lives, all those stories like mine, just waiting for someone to tell them they'd been stolen, not thrown away. I turned back to the Caldwell. To answer that, I said, I'll need access to more than glossy decks and optimistic projections. I'll need to see your real numbers, your side agreements, your off-balance sheet partnerships, and I'll need to meet one more person. Who? Marjorie asked, her smile thinning. Your friend, I said. The one whose shell companies dance so gracefully with your loans. Victor Sterling. The room went dead still. Ethan finally opened the folder. Inside, the top page showed a diagram. Caldwell Holdings LLC at the center, lines spidering out to smaller companies. At the edge, a box labeled V's Advisory Group. Underneath, Victor Sterling, managing partner. Richard's jaw clenched. I wasn't aware that Mr. Sterling's business relationships were of interest to you, he said. I met his gaze steadily. They are, I said. Very much so. In fact, I'm arranging a meeting with him as we speak. It would be advantageous for you if I heard consistent stories from all parties. Ethan finally spoke, his voice low. Who did you say you worked for again, Ms. Hart? He asked. I smiled. Myself, I said. But let's just say, I have a personal interest in how Victor treats family. The word family landed with purpose. Marjorie's eyes narrowed. Vanessa appeared at the door then, one in hand, clearly mid-text. She froze when she saw me. For a moment she didn't recognize me either. Then her eyes widened, just a fraction. Her lips parted like she was about to say a name she hadn't said since the night she'd streamed on humiliation for her followers. I turned my head slightly, meeting her gaze, and in that instant I saw realization slam into her. Harper. Her fingers tightened around her phone. Ethan followed her line of sight and looked back at me. Really looked beyond the hair, beyond the clothes, beyond the name. Who are you? He whispered. Barely audible. I held his gaze. For the first time in 4 years, I wasn't looking up at him from a lower step or from behind a tray. I was eye level. I'm the woman you thought you erased, I said calmly. Then I smiled, slow and deliberate. And I'm just getting started. If you're still here with Stories Untold, drop a comment and tell me where in the world you're watching from. Because in the final part, Harper stops playing nice. The secrets between the Caldwells and Victor Sterling explode in public, and the girl they called trash walks into a room with her real last name and takes everything back. Vanessa Caldwell didn't speak. She didn't have to. Her face said everything. That tight, terrified stillness, the kind people get when they realize the joke they told 4 years ago is walking back into the room, holding receipts. Ethan's eyes flicked between Vanessa and me like his brain was sprinting. Miss Hart, Richard said, voice clipped. Our relationship with Victor Sterling is confidential. I smiled politely. Confidential to the public, I corrected. Not to due diligence. Marjorie's laugh came out too bright. Oh, investors, always so dramatic. But her fingers were tapping the table, fast, a nervous habit. I noticed everything now. Ethan shifted in his seat. The meeting is over, he said, trying to sound in control. I leaned forward. Calm, no, I said softly. It's just starting. It's just starting. I reached into my bag and slid one more document onto the table. 1 page, simple, lethal. A letter of intent, $10 million. My offer contingent on complete financial transparency and a meeting with Victor Sterling within 48 hours. Richard stared at the number like it could resurrect his pride. Marjorie's eyes lit up, greedy despite herself. Ethan didn't look at the offer. He looked at me. His voice dropped. You're not Elena Hart, he said quietly. I held his gaze. Correct. Vanessa's phone buzzed in her hand like a trapped insect. She didn't pick it up. For once, she wasn't live streaming. Good. Some moments were meant to be remembered by the people who earned them. Richard cleared his throat. We will arrange the meeting, he said, each word stiff. Victor is busy. Busy. Tell him, I replied. that the investor he can't intimidate is requesting his time. Marjorie rose, smile back in place. Miss Hart, why don't we celebrate this new partnership with dinner at our home? A private dinner. Family style, family style. The phrase almost made me laugh. But I simply nodded. That would be lovely. Ethan's head snapped toward his mother. Mom, Marjorie cut him off with a look. Then she turned to me again, sweet as poison. Tomorrow night, she said. 8 o'clock. I stood, smoothing my jacket. Perfect, I said. And as I walked out, I leaned toward Ethan, just close enough that he could hear me, but not close enough to give him the satisfaction of fear. Tell Sloan Whitmore, I whispered, that silver dresses don't protect liars. His face went pale. And then I left them there, staring at the door as if it might swing back open and prove this was a hallucination. But it wasn't. It was the beginning of the end. That night, back at the secure Sterling residence, Patricia didn't smile when I told her about the dinner invitation. She frowned. They're rushing, she said. That's dangerous. Daniel sat in his armchair by the fireplace, a blanket over his knees, his breathing shallow. The cancer had hollowed him out in ways that made my throat tighten every time I noticed. They want to evaluate the threat, he said softly. Marjorie will want to see if she can charm you. Ethan will want to see if he can recognize you. Vanessa will want to see if she can catch you slipping. Patricia nodded. And Victor will want to see if you're worth killing. The room went still. I swallowed. He'd go that far? Patricia's eyes were flat. People who steal babies don't stop at financial crimes, she said. Daniel's hand tightened on the armrest. Victor is a coward, he rasped. But cowards are the most vicious when cornered. I forced myself to breathe. Then we don't corner him in private. I said. Patricia's gaze sharpened. Exactly, she replied. We corner him in public. She opened her laptop and turned it toward me. On the screen, an event listing. Sterling Global Holdings, emergency board and shareholder session. Scheduled for 2 days from now. Daniel's name was on the agenda. So was Victor's. Patricia's voice lowered. We've been building a case quietly, but it's time to make the case loudly. I stared at the screen. My stomach twisted with fear and something else. Anticipation. Will he come? I asked. Patricia nodded. He can't not come, she said. If he refuses, the board suspects he's hiding. If he attends, we control the room. Daniel looked at me, eyes shining. You wanted to destroy the Caldwells first, he said. But if Victor wins, you'll never touch them. He leaned forward, voice rough. So you take down Victor, then the Caldwells fall with him. I nodded once. Okay, I said. Then we do it. The next day was a blur of preparation. Not glamorous preparation. War preparation. Patricia walked me through the sequence again and again. Victor is invited to the shareholder session under the belief that Elena Hart will announce a partnership with Sterling Global. The Caldwells are invited as strategic partners because Victor enjoys showing off his influence. Media is tipped off anonymously. Enough to bring cameras, not enough to make Victor suspicious. Federal investigators, already coordinating with Patricia, wait outside until the right moment. I enter as Elena and leave as Harper Monroe Sterling. The name felt strange in my mouth. Harper Monroe Sterling, a real name. A name that belonged to a life I never got to live. That night, Daniel called me into the library. The mansion was quiet, the kind of quiet that feels like history listening. He sat at the long table with an envelope in front of him. I don't want to do this, I admitted, my voice cracking. I don't want my first weeks as your daughter to be revenge. Daniel reached across the table and took my hand. This isn't revenge, he said softly. It's restoration. He tapped the envelope. Inside, he said, is a letter I wrote for you, in case I don't make it to the meeting. My throat tightened. Don't say that. His eyes were gentle but exhausted. We don't get to bargain with time, he whispered. We only get to spend it. I nodded, blinking back tears. Daniel's hand tightened slightly. No matter what happens, he said, you walk in there with your head high. You don't beg, you don't explain your worth. You demonstrate it. I swallowed hard. And if they try to paint me as unstable, I asked. He smiled faintly. Then let them, he said, because stability is a luxury you never had, and still you survived. He squeezed my hand once. That's not instability. He said, that's proof. The Caldwell dinner arrived like a trap dressed as a holiday. I pulled up to their estate at 7:55. This time, no side entrance, no tray, no cheap coat. I walked up the front steps in a black dress and a wool coat that made me feel like armor had been stitched into the seams. The doors opened. Marjorie stood there, pearls gleaming, smile wide. "Ms. Hart," she cooed. "Welcome." I stepped inside and took in the foyer. The same marble, the same towering tree, the same place where my ring had slipped away into snow. The house smelled like pine and expensive candles. Marjorie leaned in as if confiding. "We're keeping it intimate," she said. "Just family. Intimate. Family." I nodded. Then I heard the voice. Sloan Whitmore. "It's so generous of you," she said, somewhere beyond the archway, "to consider a partnership with the Caldwells." I followed Marjorie into the dining room. Ethan stood at the head of the table, tense. Richard sat with a drink already poured. Vanessa sat with her phone face down for once, eyes too bright. And Sloan, beautiful, polished, sat beside Ethan like she owned his future. Sloan's gaze landed on me. For half a second, her smile faltered. Not because she recognized me, because she felt something she couldn't name. Instinct. "Predators had it too." "Miss Hart," Sloan said, rising gracefully. "What a pleasure. I've heard you're brilliant." I shook her hand calm. "People exaggerate," I replied, "but it's true I'm hard to fool." Sloan laughed lightly. Ethan didn't. Marjorie clapped her hands. "Dinner," she announced. We sat and it began. The questions disguised as compliments. "How did you build your portfolio?" Richard asked. "Where do you come from?" Marjorie asked. "What's your family like?" Sloan asked, voice sweet. Ethan watched every answer like he was searching for a crack. Vanessa watched like she was waiting for a slip. I answered smoothly, keeping Elena's story consistent. American-born, educated abroad, private finance, discretion. Then Marjorie leaned back and said casually, "It's refreshing to meet a woman who isn't emotional." Her eyes flicked to Ethan, then to Sloan. "Ethan's first marriage," she continued, "was a disaster. The girl had issues, trauma, you understand." My fork paused midair. The room went quiet. Sloan's eyes gleamed with curiosity. Ethan's jaw tightened. Vanessa's lips curled. I set my fork down slowly. "Trauma," I repeated softly. Marjorie nodded sympathetically. "Yes, she was raised in foster care. Such a shame. But you know how it is? Some people grow from hardship and others use it." Ethan finally spoke, voice low. "Mother," Marjorie waved him off. "I'm just being honest." She turned to me again. "It's why I admire you, Miss Hart," she said. "A self-made woman. Not someone who tries to steal a legacy she didn't earn. Steal." The word rang in my head like a bell. I smiled slightly. "Interesting choice of words," I said. Marjorie blinked. "Pardon? Nothing," I replied. "Just, words matter." Richard took a slow sip of his drink. "The past is irrelevant," he said. "What matters is the future." "Agreed," I replied. Then I looked directly at Ethan. "Tell me," I said, voice calm, "did your first wife sign the prenup after reading it?" Ethan's face flickered. Vanessa sucked in a breath. Sloan leaned forward. "Oh," she purred, "I love this kind of detail." Ethan's voice came out tight. "Yes," he said. "She signed." I nodded. "And did she sign the loans in her name too?" I asked. A beat of silence. Richard's eyes sharpened. "What loans?" Ethan's gaze snapped to his father. Marjorie's smile thinned. Vanessa's face went almost white. And Sloane's expression shifted. Subtle, but I caught it. A little spark of panic. Ethan forced a laugh. "Miss Hart," he said, "you're asking a lot of questions about a woman who doesn't exist in our lives anymore." I tilted my head. "I disagree," I said softly. "I think she exists in your balance sheets." Marjorie slammed her hand lightly on the table. "Enough," she snapped, then caught herself and smiled again. "Forgive me. Christmas stress." Vanessa's voice shook. "Why are you doing this?" she blurted. Everyone looked at her. Vanessa swallowed, eyes fixed on me. "Why do you keep bringing her up?" I met her gaze, and then I gave her a gift. And then I gave her a gift. The smallest, sharpest smile. The kind that says, "You know why." Vanessa's breath hitched. Ethan's eyes widened as he followed Vanessa's reaction again. And in that moment I saw it. The recognition finally clicking into place in his mind like a lock turning. Not certainty, but suspicion. Fear. Fear. He stared at my face, searching beneath the makeup, beneath the hair. I looked at him like he was something I might buy or discard. "No," I said simply. I turned to leave, and that's when Sloan spoke a little too quickly. Ms. Hart, she said, voice too bright. Before you go, Victor Sterling is excited to meet you tomorrow. Tomorrow, my spine chilled. So Victor already knew about the meeting. That meant he was moving. Fast. I nodded once, calm. I look forward to it, I replied. Then I walked out, the click of my heels echoing through the same hallways where I used to walk quietly, so no one would remember I existed. Outside, the air hit my lungs like freedom, but Patricia's voice rang in my head. Victor will want to see if you're worth killing. On the drive back, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I didn't answer, it buzzed again and again. On the fourth call, I picked up, silence. Then a man's voice, smooth and amused. Harper Monroe Sterling, he said. My blood turned to ice. No one used that name out loud yet. No one except Patricia. Daniel, the tutors. Who is this? I demanded. A low chuckle. You don't remember family voices? The man asked. That's tragic. My grip tightened on the phone. Victor, I said. He sighed, mock disappointment. So serious, he murmured. Your father raised a timid little ghost, and suddenly she thinks she's a queen. My heart pounded, but my voice stayed steady. If you're calling to threaten me, I'm calling to advise you. Victor interrupted, still calm. Stay in your lane. Take a settlement. Disappear again. You'll live longer. I forced a breath. You stole my life, I said. I'm taking it back. Victor laughed softly like I'd told a joke. You think the Caldwells hurt you? He murmured. That was a social slap. What I do is erase. The line went quiet for a second. Then Victor spoke again, voice lower. Tell Patricia Hale, he said, that her father's old favors won't save her this time. My stomach dropped. He knew her too. He knew everything. And Harper, he added almost gently, tomorrow. Don't bring your father. He looks fragile. Accidents happen to fragile men. My breath caught. You touch him and I swear, I began. Victor hung up. I sat there staring at the dark screen. Then, very slowly, something settled in me. Not fear, clarity. He wasn't bluffing. And now neither could I. The morning of the shareholder meeting, Daniel insisted on coming. I'm not hiding, he rasped, pushing himself into his suit like it was a last act of defiance. Patricia argued, Daniel, it's a security risk. Daniel looked at me. I searched my entire life for my daughter, he said quietly. I will not miss the moment she takes her name back. My throat tightened. I nodded. Okay, I whispered, but you stay close to security. Patricia exhaled sharply. Fine, she said. But we do this exactly as planned. We arrived at Sterling Global's headquarters in Boston. The building was glass and steel, cold, powerful, towering. My name was already inside it, hidden in legal language, buried in trusts and shares. Today, it would be spoken out loud. We entered through a private elevator. In the upper conference hall, the room was packed. Board members, shareholders, attorneys, assistants. And because Patricia had timed the leak perfectly, media crews with cameras and bright lights. Victor Sterling sat near the front, relaxed, smiling like he owned the room. He looked like Daniel, but sharpened into cruelty. Same eyes, colder. Same jaw, harder. And beside him, like obedient pets hoping for scraps, sat the Caldwells. Richard, Marjorie, Ethan, Vanessa, and Sloan Whitmore. Sloan's hand rested on her stomach protectively. Pregnant, of course. A perfect society storyline. Ethan Caldwell engaged to a senator's daughter, baby on the way, legacy secured, a manufactured fairy tale. My hands clenched. Patricia touched my elbow. Remember, she whispered. Control the room. We walked in. As Elena Hart, heads turned. Victor's smile widened as he stood to greet me like an old friend. Elena, he said warmly, extending his hand. I shook it. His grip tightened slightly, a test. His eyes locked onto mine, and in them I saw it. Recognition, not of my face, of my resistance. You're smaller than I expected, he murmured, so only I could hear. I smiled politely. You're uglier than your reputation, I murmured back. Victor's smile twitched. Patricia stepped forward. Mr. Sterling, she said, voice crisp, the meeting will begin now. Victor nodded as if graciously granting permission. We took our places. Daniel sat beside Patricia, breathing measured. I stood at the side, waiting. Victor approached the podium first, confident. He welcomed everyone, spoke about transparency, about growth, about protecting Sterling's legacy. Every word was a lie. And then he announced it. Today, Victor said, we are pleased to introduce a strategic investor who will help Sterling Global expand into new markets. He gestured toward me. Elena Hart. Applause rose. Polite, curious, hungry. Victor stepped aside. I walked to the podium, and for a moment the room blurred. Lights, faces, cameras. This was the kind of stage Ethan had used to humiliate me. Now it was mine. I looked down at the prepared notes. Then I looked up and tossed them aside. The room stilled. Victor's eyes narrowed. Ethan leaned forward tense. Marjorie's lips parted. Vanessa's phone was in her hand again, trembling. Good, let her record this. I leaned toward the microphone. My name, I said clearly, is not Elena Hart. A murmur swept the room. Victor's smile froze. Cameras zoomed. Ethan's face drained of color as if he'd seen a ghost. I'm here today, I continued, voice steady, because I was stolen from this company before I ever had a chance to know it. Gasps. Board members glanced at each other. Victor's jaw tightened. Patricia stood ready. Daniel's hand trembled on his cane. I took a breath. My birth name, I said, each word sharp, deliberate, is Harper Monroe Sterling. The room erupted. Shouts, questions, flashbulbs. Victor stepped forward, voice booming. This is outrageous, he snapped. This woman is an imposter. Patricia raised her hand. Sit down, she said coldly into her microphone. The authority in her tone cut through the noise. She clicked a remote. The screen behind me lit up. A DNA report, a birth certificate, a hospital record, a confession letter. Victor's face tightened as the evidence stacked like bricks. I continued, voice calm in the chaos. For 26 years, I said, I lived as an orphan while the man sitting in the front row enjoyed the benefits of a missing heir. Victor surged to his feet. This is a hostile takeover, he shouted. Security. Patricia lifted her phone and spoke into it once. Immediately, doors at the back of the hall opened. Not Sterling security, federal agents. They moved with quiet purpose, badges visible. The room fell into stunned silence. Victor's mouth opened slightly. For the first time, he looked uncertain. I didn't stop. Victor Sterling, I said, has been embezzling funds from Sterling Global Holdings through shell corporations, falsified vendor contracts, and fraudulent consulting agreements. Patricia clicked again. On the screen, a web of companies, transactions, and dates. Then a bank transfer highlighted in red. Victor's signature, a number so large it made people gasp again. Victor's voice cracked. This is fabricated. Patricia spoke into her microphone. It's already been verified, she said. And it's already been forwarded to federal investigators. An agent stepped forward. Victor Sterling, he said, voice flat. You are under arrest. Victor backed up a step, eyes wild. And that's when Richard Caldwell stood abruptly. This is insane, Richard barked. Our company has nothing to do with. Patricia clicked again. The screen showed Caldwell Shell Corporations, loans, co-signed guarantees, emails, meeting calendars. One subject line caught the cameras. Stir child situation. The room sucked in a collective breath. Richard's face went gray. Marjorie made a strangled sound. Half gasp, half scream. Ethan turned slowly toward his father. Dad, he whispered. Patricia's voice was I. Caldwell Holdings participated in laundering funds out of Sterling Global, she said. And those funds include money used to obstruct the investigation into Harper Sterling's disappearance. That sentence landed like a death blow, because financial crimes were one thing. A missing baby? That was something even wealthy people couldn't clap away. Agents moved again. Richard started shouting. Marjorie started sobbing. Vanessa dropped her phone. And Ethan just stood there like his spine had been removed. Then I turned my attention to him, quietly, personally. Ethan Caldwell, I said, you humiliated your wife at Christmas and told the world she was nothing. He stared at me, eyes glossy. You, he whispered. Harper, I held up one final document, the loan agreements, the forged signatures. And while you were calling her trash, I said, you were forging her name. Ethan's mouth opened, but nothing came out. I looked around the room, letting every camera capture his face. Tell them, I said softly. Tell them why you needed her credit and not yours. His eyes darted to Sloane. Pregnant, pale, trembling. Then to Marjorie, screaming now, trying to push past security. Then to the agents. Ethan's voice broke. I was trying to keep the business afloat, he choked out. I nodded. By drowning me, I said calmly. Then I turned to Sloane. And you, I said, came into my marriage wearing silver like you were the prize. Sloane's chin lifted. This is inappropriate, she snapped. I'm carrying Ethan's child. Patricia clicked again. The screen changed. A string of messages, not between Ethan and Sloan. Between Sloan and another man. Her ex. A political aide named Grant Hollis. Dates. Proof. A pregnancy timeline that didn't match Ethan. And one message highlighted cruel and careless. He'll marry me. He needs the senator. He doesn't have to know it's yours. The room exploded again. Sloan shrieked. Ethan staggered back as if struck. Marjorie let out a wail that sounded like a dying animal. Victor, already in cuffs, stared at the screen with pure hatred. Because his perfect puppet show was collapsing in front of cameras, and I stood at the center of it steady. I leaned into the microphone one last time. My name is Harper Monroe Sterling, I said clearly. And today I reclaim my life. I looked at Daniel. He was crying silently. I stepped away from the podium and walked to him. He gripped my hand like it was the last real thing on earth. You did it, he whispered. I squeezed back. We did, I whispered. Behind us, the room was chaos. Agents moving, board members shouting, reporters yelling questions. The Caldwells falling apart in real time. But in that small space between Daniel's hand and mine, it was quiet, it was peace. Daniel passed away 3 days later. Not in a diner, not alone, not searching. He died with his daughter holding his hand, his last breath leaving his body like a sigh of relief. And because the world loves an ending, people assumed that was mine too. They were wrong. Because after the arrests and the headlines and the scandal, I still had a choice to make: become like them, or become what they tried to prevent. So I rebuilt Sterling Global, not as a monument to power, as a correction. I created a scholarship program for foster kids who aged out with nothing but trash bags and bruised hope. I funded legal aid for people crushed by debts they didn't sign. I opened a foundation in my mother's name, Clara Monroe Sterling, because she deserved more than a footnote in a kidnapping story. And the Caldwells, their empire cracked fast. Investors fled. Partners vanished. Richard faced charges. Marjorie's social circle evaporated like perfume in cold air. Vanessa's followers turned on her when the video of the Christmas divorce resurfaced. Because cruelty looks different when the victim becomes untouchable. And Ethan tried to call me again and again. Voicemails, apologies, excuses. He said he was sorry. He said he didn't know how far his parents would go. He said he loved me once. Maybe he did. But love that doesn't protect you is just another form of hunger. So I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The greatest revenge wasn't watching him lose everything. It was realizing I could walk away and still be whole. Because I was never what they called me. I was always Sterling. And that's the truth they couldn't survive. If you watched this video on Stories Untold, comment where you're watching from and tell the truth. Did Harper go too far? Or was it perfect justice? And if you want more wife revenge twist stories like this, make sure you subscribe and like, because the next one is even darker.